This is a BBC podcast. You can get all our podcasts and our terms of use at bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.
Hello and welcome to World Football on BBC World Service. I'm Alan Green. On this week's programme, are right-wing extremists targeting European football?
What we're noticing is that some very old and unpleasant faces from the past have come back, as it were, come back to haunt us. I mean, the former football hooligans are actually back active politically in the guise of the EDL, following the England team where they can.
The head of the anti-racism organisation Kick It Out has warned that right-wing extremists are trying to infiltrate football. Lord Herman Ousley describes the recent massacre in Norway as a wake-up call, and he's told World Football that the game is vulnerable to an increase in hate crimes and violence. Last week in England, the leader of the far-right English Defence League was convicted of organising a brawl involving 100 supporters of Luton Town Football Club. Lord Ousley believes the authorities need to be vigilant.
There is a much more greater threat in the Eastern European countries than there is in places like England, the UK, Scandinavian countries and so on. But it does exist. Now, the worry in England is that you've got Casuals United, EDL. Many of these are disaffected people who, to some extent, have had links with football. And because of the cleaning up of the game, they have been distanced to some extent. However, a number of these groups have been trying, we know from our own intelligence, to get back into football, to influence young people, particularly where they drink, where they hang out, either before football matches, after football matches, and that is the worry.
Why are you saying this now? Has something changed?
No, it hasn't changed, but these things sometimes go in cycle where they manifest themselves visibly in the minds of people, but it's always there, and football is a target because of its mass aggregation of numbers, but also there's a natural abhorrence to what has been done in football over the last 10, 20 years in trying to drive out racists and other forms of extreme and antisocial behaviour.
Now, you say that the recent terrible events in Norway should be a wake-up call to football authorities. Well, why have you made the link?
I think the link is quite an obvious one to make. It links very much to the issue of complacency. There's always a tendency to look and say, oh, that's over there, and it's nothing to do with us. And we almost close ranks. And I think it's quite important that the security services themselves know that there is vulnerability. Sometimes we, in football, might be very good at applauding ourselves, patting ourselves in the back, and not recognizing that that sort of atrocity could occur here, and it could be associated with football because of the vulnerability and the way in which the extreme right target football fans.
Lord Ousley, the head of Kick It Out. And as Lord Ousley says, the problem isn't confined to England. Jacek Persky is a member of the xenophobia organisation Never Again, which is based in Poland. He's told World Football that it's a real concern in Eastern Europe, and he explained how the authorities are trying to address the issue before next year's European Championship in Poland and Ukraine.
It works like this. If you expose it, punish the people who are guilty for such incidents, like the racists who are coming and showing the racist flags, for example. The second step, which is very, very important, it is educational work, to, let's say, protect the next generation from the hate speech that is spread at the stadiums. Okay, everyone recognizes swastika, but for example, a symbol of Ku Klux Klan, not necessarily everyone recognizes as a racist, So we give them this knowledge how to recognize the symbol and what to do. But in the same moment, we have bigger amount of incidents, racist incidents, connected with the shouts, singing racist slogans.
So what attracts young men to these extreme far-right groups? Matthew Collins is a former right-wing extremist and football hooligan, and he's just completed a book called Hate, detailing his time as a member of the far right. He's now a campaigner for the anti-fascist organisation Searchlight, and told me about the strong links between the far right and football, and he gave his response to Lord Ousley's comments.
It's not so much that the far right, the extreme far right, are so much back at infiltrating football. What we've noticed is that the former football hooligans, the hooligan casuals who terrorised football terraces in the 1980s, and to a degree some of the early 90s, are actually back active politically in the guise of the EDL, waving the England flag, following the England team where they can. What we're noticing is that some very old and unpleasant faces from the past have come back, as it were, come back to haunt us. I mean, the work that we do looking at extremism and far-right extremism in this country points to groups like the English Defence League, who are behaving very much like the National Front did in the 1970s and 1980s. I went to England versus Egypt, and I was slightly concerned when Egypt scored, the reaction from a very small but vocal minority of England fans at that game, who made quite vile comments about the religion of the Egyptian supporters, and I'd noticed that. But I would say generally all around it, although we're careful, I still go to football every week, and I still think it's an excellent atmosphere.
I was surprised when Lord Ouseley said that he felt the recent killings in Norway should be a wake-up call to the football authorities. I mean, do you think those tragic events in Oslo actually encourage the far right?
Well, I agree with him enormously. I'd put it the other way around. The far right in this country, the EDL, were what impressed Andris Breivik so much. I mean, he saw the English Defence League as something to be proud of. In fact, he took his inspiration from them. So he is actually quite right. There is something, again, that surrounds football that is quite sinister, and he is absolutely right. Andris Breivik was an Anglophile. He was in touch with members of the EDL and the extreme far right in this country, and again, the far right in this country attracts a lot of people, and a lot of people are very attracted to it. And our football teams, regardless of what they do, are part of that sort of national identity, aggressive nationalism. And I think his lordship was absolutely spot on, actually.
What was it when you were younger that pulled you towards the far right and into football hooliganism?
Well, football hooliganism. Well, I was attracted to the far right because I was looking for role models. I was looking to belong to something that would give me a voice and an opportunity to express myself. And of course, it was the far right who gave me the opportunity to express myself and then told me what to say. And the football hooliganism thing, well, it very much was a sense of danger as well as a sense of belonging. And it was the idea that I could be very, very antisocial, that I could disrupt things, I could destroy things, that I could run with a pack and be part of a hooligan mentality. But I think, like a lot of people, when you talk about football hooliganism, the majority of people are there to watch football hooliganism. When there's outbreaks of hooliganism, if you look, there's people actually standing there watching who are mesmerised by it. And also now, it's glamorized. We've got more films coming out about football hooligans in this country than just about any other genre. And so for me, it was part of belonging to, a culture, Englishness, that argument that we're still having. It was, the English football fan was a Neanderthal hooligan, and I was a far-right fascist and a Neanderthal and a hooligan, and therefore it all fitted in very, very nicely.
And what turned you away from it?
Well, I think one of the things that turned me away from the far right was actually getting older and starting to ask myself questions like, what exactly is it I want? How do I want to define myself? What do I know about myself, my people, my country? And it was coming to the conclusion that these far right racists and fascists, they had a vision for my country that I didn't necessarily agree with, and one that, of course, that now I'm absolutely opposed to. But it wasn't an easy thing to sort of give up, because when I gave up on the far right and gave up on all this hooliganism and all this troublemaking, I found myself in a bizarre situation, which is one I'd been in almost before I got involved in the far right, is I still couldn't define where I was, where I fitted into society. The only thing that I was clear was that I didn't want to be a far right fascist anymore, and had to, because I was getting older, was actually had to find out for myself how I would define Englishness, how I would define my identity. And that, I went through that 20 years ago, and I think now there's a lot of people going through it now on council estates up and down the country. And I think this extremist behaviour and hooliganism, we have to be quite clear, isn't necessarily always going to be confined to just white working class lads. Some of the football hooligans who operate in this country now and in around football hooligans gang are also black, and some are Asian as well. But ostensibly it is traditionally a white male aggressive English identity thing, and there will be inside that, now black and Asian hooligans. There are football hooligan gangs in this country who have black, quite high profile black hooligan members.
There clearly is complacency, but there's also a consciousness developing right across Europe that there is a problem with racism in football. How should they tackle it, the authorities?
England is, I would say, the least racist place to go and see a football match in Europe. I mean, I'm going to Poland in a few months, and I'm going to go to Ukraine and Russia to watch football matches, and I'll see some extraordinary things there. I think we have to get to the situation where it's just unacceptable. And there's been some wonderful incidences of people dealing with racism in this country. I remember 2 years ago, a Plymouth Argyle supporter made some racist comments and was almost lynched by his own fans and had to run onto the pitch to escape them. And I think we just have to make people around us who are making racist comments at football, if they feel unwelcome. But there'll always be someone, somewhere, who'll want to shout something out. And I think 9 times out of 10, if you were to do it in an English football ground these days, you'd probably get a smack in the mouth for it.
The former right-wing extremist and football hooligan Matthew Collins. The English Defence League, meantime, says they strongly reject all forms of violence and they deny any links with the Norwegian killer Anders Breivik. Well, that's all for this week. Remember, if you want to download World Football, just go to our website. That's bbcworldservice.com/sport. Follow the links to the World Football page. And do join us again at the same time next week. Until then, always remember, World Service, World Football.